Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I'm Eric.
And I'm Toby. And what we're going to talk about today is the gaming revolution. All right. And what we mean by the gaming revolution is where video games now are the mainstream culture, and those that don't play video games or don't understand it are the subculture, but didn't read the memo. That's my way of putting. You can see on screen an article that we wrote about in our Medium channel, and of course it'll be in the whatever it is that you get to.
It'll be in the podcast description for anyone who's listening to the audio version of this, for sure.
And I suppose what we want to talk about really is in this discussion is like, the role that video game technology is going to have on organizational training and strategy, teamwork and leadership. And to do that, we're going to tell a bit of a story.
So the article, for those of you who have it in front of your eyes, it brings up a point initially that I think most people just don't understand, which is this thing you were saying where video games are the mainstream. To put this in context, for anyone who might not really grasp what we're talking about and not really have a notion of what video games are and what they represent, here's a few sort of key demographics. There are 3.24 billion gamers across the world. Think about that for a second, right? The average gamer is 35 years old, not 18, not 14, 35. 50% of Europeans play video games. That's one that I find kind of interesting. We're reaching a situation where in some regions, video games are consumed by a majority of people. So some of the ones that are interesting to point out is, in Asia, video games represent one of the biggest entertainment markets at 1.4 billion annual, I imagine. And what you have to understand with that is, across the board, video games are massive. Just massive.
I think
bigger than Hollywood.
No, that's what we were saying. So here, 46% of video gamers in the US are female. So we get rid of this notion.
Yep.
So we got rid of it's a teenage game. We got rid of the male-female divide. There's also a intergenerational, because though that doesn't say that, there's a much larger group who are 40, 50 and above who are playing games and, anti-dementia type training as well. And some people are very good. But I think it's coming back to this idea, that we're controversially saying that the people that we meet in, we used to be a modest publisher of games, produce games for companies, and we now basically rent our flagship game, which is a leadership and teamwork simulation. But in doing that, what we encounter is prejudice and bias. And that prejudice and bias is primarily built on the fact that they have no experience of games.
Yep.
And that they still carry within their formatting that games are for children.
Yep.
At work, and that playing is not something that the real world is about. And yet, those views separate you into two parts of the paradigm shift. Here, when you were just hinting at it that it's bigger than Hollywood, video games are the biggest entertainment shift on the planet ever. Not only is it bigger than Hollywood, and it's transforming professional and social world. It's also multi-platform in terms of that it's both in mobile, that it's in PC, and it's on new handheld devices. That the content of what video game publishers create has to be innovative, has to be challenging, they have to be at the top of the game to be able to make this come. And where you see a crossover between the content and the narration and the storytelling, all right, from The Last of Us, for example, right, that takes place within a video game that's got this incredible decision-making process within the video game, to now streaming videos, right?
Yeah,
And that the
really
quality.
good series. Yeah.
Oh, but for me, it's just like it was unbelievable storytelling. I know some people say that the storytelling within the game is better than
course.
the video, but that's good.
Yeah,
because that means you got two.
It creates a bit of a discourse between, you know, which media is better adapted to telling this kind of story. And I think one of the things to keep in mind with this is that games, you know, to a certain extent, the word video game is not ideal because, you know, it has that notion of game in it, and everyone thinks of it as just fun and just entertaining, right? I think you have to understand that it goes way beyond that. Video games are more than just entertainment at this point. In the article, there's this bit about esports, and you know, for those watching the video, there's this image of the 2022 League of Legends World Championship. You have to understand this. It is, you know, massive amounts of people in a stadium watching people play video games. Think of this event as like the Super Bowl of video games. It is that big. And of course, millions of people watching this live on the internet. And also, you know, afterwards, not just live. Video games are no longer just about entertainment. They are a core part of our media culture. There are games, you know, there are games made for activism. There are games made to share ideas. There are games made to teach. There are games made to you know, build things together. There are games made to communicate over. Video games are exactly like, you know, video or you know, writing. They are a medium for transmitting, sharing, and experiencing things that go beyond anything that you might think, unless you're very much vested in the world of video games and are already very interested in it.
I think there's another thing within it, and maybe, you know, because when we talk about video, all right, you know, you could say, I'm going to watch a video, that's Netflix. Mm-hmm. That's right, okay. And then we talk about video game, well, you know, what's linked? There isn't in those two words, as you were pointing out, a real sort of a way of unraveling what people are experiencing now. Because what we're talking about here is that game engines are publishing content that's so innovative, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah. You
can experience far-flung universes. You can experience sandbox environments that, you know, the parallel the development of universes. If you take EVE Online, right, which is a single server environment, you know, anywhere from 300 to 500 plus people playing online simultaneously, right, in some of the most exciting adventures that have ever been seen in the history of video games, you know.
Yeah.
Some of when we talk about World of Warcraft, all right, people have been playing this for 12 to 13 years, getting better at the content. But here within that, so when we say video games, what are they doing in World of Warcraft? You've got teams of 40 people versus 40 people, all right, on highly complex arenas, playing against each other continuously every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for years, right? Okay. You just don't get that on let's go watch a video game on, a video on Netflix or Prime or whatever. So it's not till you start to realize that this content is collaborative, both from a publishing point of view, a participant point of view, and from, if you want, a news story point of view.
Yeah.
And here we see it transforming the world of sport. Still at the top of the world of sport in Olympics, etc., there's still a narrow group of people that have absolutely no understanding of what esport is.
Yep.
All right. And they're still part of the narrative. Is it a real sport? Is it not real sport? Well, you know, when we look at the picture here, people are voting with their feet, right?
Yeah.
It's a real sport.
Yeah.
The debate about whether it looks like basketball or whether it looks like football or a test is, who cares?
Yep.
Right? Because sorry.
No. I think that, that's sort of hitting the nail on the head. There's this thing where we have a massive cultural bias happening, where no one who is outside of the world of video games or esports or video game related entertainment understands the cultural impact, the presence, and the meaning of them. And everyone who's inside still thinks of it as this sort of niche subculture that they're a part of, even though it's not true anymore, and doesn't understand that they are the norm. In our business, it's been very interesting because just a few years ago, we had to do some very, very intensive education whenever we started discussing with a new client, just for them to understand what a video game was and why they could be interested in it. Why it was something that they might want to look into and explore.
So what I can't get my head around, right, is this. Here's this parallel world, right, of which it's in terms of revenues is bigger than Hollywood. Mm-hmm. That you leave work and go home to, and there it is, all right?
Yeah.
Where The Last of Us as a game is now one of the most successful video narratives on the planet, and so on and so forth.
Esports
right?
competitions becoming almost bigger than some sports events, and
this what for a while was this genre that was outside of the mainstream, right, created its own ways of people consuming it. Twitch, and now we see YouTube buying into this, and the other ways that you can watch some of the most exciting teams playing the most exciting content in the world. Right, but you can watch it when you're in the metro. You can watch it on your mobile. And not only do you get to watch it, but what these technologies did was they put chess on the map as well.
Yeah.
Right. Chess is now an esport.
Yep.
Right. Mind blowing, huh? Right. Chess has got more popular as an esport than it did sitting in a room with 20 people playing chess every 2 weeks. Right. It's really regenerated. But here within this context, we know two things. We know that the COVID transformed technologically, probably accelerating our use of virtual technologies by 10 to 15 years. Plus the push by Meta, Facebook, etc., along to the metaverse, so to speak, which we'll talk about that on another time. But it got people habituated to the fact that immersiveness is here, immersiveness is coming, and you need to get to grips with it now.
Yeah.
Now our argument would be it's not VR, it's going to be it's more augmented reality. You need to get if you can't move an avatar in a 3D environment right now, well, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because you're in trouble. If you can't navigate 3D content and all that a video game, right, would throw at you, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
It means that your immersive, never mind IQ, it's your immersive intelligence is going to be sub-zero.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have no experience whatsoever. All right? You're going to be totally lost as these technologies come out. But those people who are now mainstream, who are totally experienced in managing their lives in video games across all areas. Their immersive intelligence is ready for the scientific, technological, and digital revolutions to come.
Yep.
Well, they're not even to come; they're here right now and evolving.
That
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. A good way of sort of thinking about that is, a very specific example. But if you look at like people who are now in charge of communication and advertising and sort of the media side of companies and different entities, are for the most part younger people who grew up using social media, sharing online, using their phones to film things, using, now it's TikTok, before it was, Vine and whatever. It's the people who use those technologies and who understand them profoundly, who are now in a position to help bring a business into the future, to help get that business to reach the right people. What we're talking about is the same thing for video games. There are skill sets and ways of thinking in video games that are bound to become necessary. And if you don't have them, you will probably, you'll lose the job and someone else will get it instead.
Well, I think, or you lose the business as well,
Yeah.
because why do you want to work in a business that still thinks board games are the way they train? We've been talking about this for weeks on end, where we were dealing with a company before Christmas, and that it trained senior executives in collaboration and soft skills using board games in the 21st century. And when we asked them, well, what's the value that you bring them? We said, well, they're happy at the end of the training. And I'm like, I just want to bash my head off a brick wall. What do you mean they're happy at the end of it? What's happiness got to do with it?
Yeah.
The fact they're happy is irrelevant.
And it's probably just a result of, it fitting within their comfort zone. So it makes them happy.
But that's exactly that. That's in the happy zone. The happy zone. The happy zone is not a learning zone.
No.
The happy zone is So when we as pioneers within using video games for teamwork and leadership and soft skills development, right? So what type of content is going to be relevant for business? Well, it's going to be difficult content.
Yeah.
There's no point in having content that just makes you feel happy at the end of it. You won't have learned anything. And that's what most people outside of the world of video games think, is you've got this sort of stereotype of this fat guy with a load of beers, at 3 o'clock in the morning, just bish-bashing a controller. Well, I'm sure these people exist, but it's not going to make it work. Pardon me.
To give a bit of context, you have to understand that we're talking about video games being this massive entertainment, field of entertainment. The people who are, sort of the superstars in video games, be it on the esports side of thing, but also, just, game critics, game developers, they are now, young, hip people who are very much, within the vibe of their time. Esports players go through extremely rigorous physical training because, they are sports players. They have to be in good shape. They have to be able to focus for a long time. They have to have very, good muscle control. They have to be in good physical shape to be able to do what they're doing.
But the criticism always comes from those that don't play.
Exactly. Who don't.
The criticism.
Yeah.
Well, who have never played.
Yeah.
It's like somebody's criticizing you using a car to drive from here to London, etc. Right? And they're looking at the driving manual and saying whether it can be done or not. It's always the theoretical side of things that, and so the mainstream hasn't even realized that they're the subculture now. They haven't read the memo.
Yeah. I think that the relevant example for that is you have to take a second and think about this. What do you consider to be mainstream media? There's probably two big things that come to mind. One of them is going to be, big newspapers that did their transition to online. right? I mean, I'm thinking, the New Yorker and, all those big institutions that are mainstream media and that have been able to do that transition. You know who hasn't done the transition for the most part is the second big one. It's TV.
No,
Right? TV
no.
channels did not transition online. They're trying, but they're failing. And the reason for
Well,
that is because, it's the YouTubes, it's the Twitches, it's those companies for the most part, but those systems that came and said, we'll just do it. And who are the biggest I want to say sort of spearheads for these technologies? It's gamers.
yeah, totally.
Twitch, people might not know about it because they're in their bubble, but Twitch is the biggest online streaming platform by far. And Twitch, up until a few years ago, I think, was exclusively for video games, and it was already the biggest online streaming platform, live streaming platform in the world by a wide margin. So even just with video games, so you have to understand that your concept of what mainstream media is already false. So your concept of what mainstream is probably also false.
I think it's I think that's a really, I mean, so, as we start to talk about, how the gaming revolution can impact organizations, well, you've got to use your imagination. Here, you've got the most innovative way that you can create content, right? So what do we mean by content? Well, we mean a game workflow, what you call leveling systems, characters. I'm creating it for a team. It's exciting. What do I want? What do I want to be able to test and prove, etc.
Within the industry, they would probably refer to that as game design, right? Because it's technical terms. But
Yeah,
I know you don't like that. It's very technical.
No, of course
No,
it's
but
game design, but it's like, what's the workflow? The
exactly.
game workflow.
Yeah. It's
So what's the
what are you creating and what are you trying to achieve and how do you achieve it? I guess is the sort of the general concept of what we're talking about. And what's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just not at all. What you're talking about is design versus workflow. Workflow is a subset of design.
Yeah. I was going to say what I think what's really interesting is that games as immersive and interactive experiences, the way they're designed affects the way you use them much more than any other form of media. And I think that's where that notion of workflows, it comes in, is that you are put into an environment that will guide you and that will take you on a journey, take you on an adventure, right?
Well,
That has requirements, that requires you to meet it halfway and to do things. You're acting.
No, totally. But isn't there one word, there's one word in the business world from training that they think is divorced from video game entertainment, is pedagogy.
Yeah.
Right? No, there's no way, business trainers and that, to, hey, but what we're doing, we're into pedagogy. We want to be able to have results on learning and all the rest of it. I'm like, I'm really sorry, but you guys are really not into results on learning.
No.
Because most people have no faith that corporate training, right, LMS systems deliver any value whatsoever. It's a sort of emperor's got no clothes. Guaranteed you, in the video game entertainment, if there isn't any value in the content, nobody buys it.
Yep.
Right? And it's immediate, your feedback. So pedagogy, which means it has to build excitement, it has to build attention, it has to build difficulty, it has to build reputation. It's front and center in the game designer, in the game team, studio and designer's mind as they're building the workflow.
Yeah.
Right. Of it. So I mean, the better way of workflow is saying, is the player's experience.
Yep.
Within that. And at the end of it, there has to be something different from what you feel at the end of it than what you started at the beginning.
I think
does that make sense?
I think there's a very interesting sort of example we can give here. One of the typical, I'm going to go into a few details, so bear with me, anyone who's not familiar with games. But I'll try to make it make as much sense as possible. Often when you start a video game, the game has to teach you its mechanics. It has to teach you its systems, right? It has to teach you, imagine you're moving a character around, it has to teach you how you move your character around, right? Typically, there's this notion of tutorials, right? The game has a system in place to teach you how to do it. One of the biggest things that's happened over the course of these past, 50 years of video game history, is that that act of teaching has become something incredibly well researched, and there are very subtle ways of achieving it. And games are now achieving this thing where they're able to teach someone something, teach them a skill, without telling them anything about the skill, just by putting them in an environment that is conducive to using that skill. It's a very, very powerful thing. And I think it's incredibly revealing as to the power of video games in the world of learning and in the world of, transmitting experience, right? How can we create something that teaches you something without telling you, without, giving you a lecture? Video games have decades of proof that it is possible.
No,
that's at the core of what we're talking about, right? When we talk about a workflow, a game workflow, it is something that guides you through an experience and lets you teach yourself by following that experience.
And so by implication, what we've learned, for example, with companies that we've done, is that at the end of even short experiences, 3 2-hour playtimes, 4 2-hour playtimes, that the transfer of skills from within the game environment to the business environment is immediate. And it's not us saying it, it's them reporting it.
Yeah.
That they get that it changes the way they think, it changes the way they talk, and it changes the way they act. What is change? Their habits change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Because their awareness of what's taking place changes in what they do. So I think that one of the challenges that business leaders face is getting over this cognitive dissonance that they have. That somehow, right, the games have no value. How on earth? It's one of the things that kills me. How on earth they keep on going down creating content for the metaverse? I have never seen such a boring set of content on the planet.
Yeah.
If you're a video gamer, you would be ashamed that you spent that much money on producing really nothing.
And to be clear, when we're talking about the metaverse here, we're specifically talking about, this very corporate-friendly version of the metaverse that Facebook has been pushing for the past few years.
I don't see the difference. I mean, we were there at Second Life. I don't see the difference. In fact, I see Second Life is better between the first metaverse, Second Life, and what's now. At least in the first metaverse, they had legs.
Yep.
Right. One of the challenges they have is finding avatars with legs. Why is this? Why is this an issue between unexciting, boring, irrelevant content that generally is in the sort of metaverses that are spawning in the world, and video game entertainment? Because it's like somebody's had a lobotomy on the business side.
Yep.
Right? It's like, we are here to make non-entertainment serious stuff that doesn't work. That's where
I think
that just what.
Yeah.
Just one second. That's not to say that there aren't VR games that have been driven specifically for health or first responders that aren't really point on.
And
that's not what we're talking.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I think if we sort of take a step back, there's another way of looking at this, is that the people pushing for these technologies and these sort of, I wouldn't even say technology, because Facebook's metaverse is an idea at this point. It's not even really a technology. The real way that they're doing this is they are aiming for the lowest common denominator. They are aiming for something that feels comfortable and easy to understand for businesses, right? They're making sure that any business that they approach with this notion will be able to understand it immediately, and it'll be familiar enough. And if you extrapolate this to a certain extent, this is true across the board for anyone providing business services in many fields, especially in learning, right? You're aiming, for the most part, at trying to get something that the business understands and can easily sign off on without any notion of, is it impactful? Is it the best use of the technology? Is it something that will, evolve well, change, that is adapted to younger generations, and all that? What we're talking about here with video games is saying, okay, no, it's not the companies providing the content that have to aim for the lowest common denominator for companies to be excited. We have to educate the companies. We have to help share this idea of what the actual future looks like, right? And help them come back up to the level that anyone who plays video games can understand because they're used to it, in order for them to be able to find actual value in the technologies and their uses. When we're talking about this notion of how great a game workflow can be for teaching, well, understanding that profoundly, having experience that will help you choose a technology that can actually teach people, right?
Well, I think you really bang on there, Eric. I think one of the things that we've experienced over the last 2 weeks, right, is that we've started to hear companies talk to us about using video games for crisis management solutions.
Yep.
Primarily because in crisis management solutions, which is really point on, people really need training on this.
Yep.
They're still using tabletop games and planning scenarios that are role plays that haven't changed in centuries.
No.
Here they're contacting us because we have something that's new and that's exciting, and that we've started to, we've now customized our products for specifically for crisis management. In the same way that data literacy has the same issues that there is in crisis management, was how do you find a way that trains people on content that makes a difference and transfers their skills at the end of it to a value within the business consistently.
Yep.
You can do this with video games. And not only within the video games, what you can do is you can upgrade and adapt the workflows and create new workflows as the training requirements evolve. I think that, does that make sense? Because I think there's a thing happening, all right, whereby the gaming revolution is impacting the business world.
Yep.
But the paradigm change, right, is a bit like you bring a frog, put a frog in a pan of water and bring it to boil.
Yeah.
It doesn't recognize the danger signals. Take a frog, throw it in the pan of boiling water, and it jumps out. Nobody's recognized that actually the world has changed around them, and that video game technology, its content, its norms, and its values is now the dominant paradigm.
Yeah.
And that organizations need to wake up to this, not because, wow, that's fantastic. No, this is a business opportunity for which we can really help our people develop new forms of education and new forms of high performance in whatever domain that they're working in.
I think if we were to sort of give people a direction to go in terms of trying to educate themselves about this and trying to be ready, right? I think there are a few things we can suggest. One of them is sort of ask yourself the question, do I know what a video game is? Have I played a video game? Why not, right? And also, if I look around me, do I know if people are interested in video games? Can they share experience with me? Because you'll be surprised at how many people around you play video games and will have these sorts of discussions we're having about the value of video games, even if they don't know about it. As soon as you bring the question up, it will happen. And I think the second question, especially sort of if you're in a leadership position in a business, would be to ask, what would your reaction be if someone came to you with their video game experience on their CV?
That's another. I was going to keep that for another podcast, but you're
Well,
absolutely
we could
right.
do a full episode about that. But I'm just leaving the question out there. What would your reaction be? And that will inform you a lot about your ability to understand and to be at least open-minded and potentially forward-thinking.
Yeah, right. So what are we looking at here for the audiences? We're seeing people from Lords of the Fallen. We're seeing people from
Characters, specifically.
Characters, avatars from a whole range of games.
Yeah.
Right. Now the question would be, looking at all this range of games and avatars, whether would you as an audience be able to recognize who these are?
How many can you name? Right.
Right. Well, that's actually God of War and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
So I'm a bit crueler than you, right? Because maybe I'm from a. I'm like, if you are not playing video games now, move.
Yeah.
And stop playing.
It's already too late, so try and catch up.
Right. Yeah, well, then you're crueler than me. You can't catch up.
Yeah. No,
but you are
still time.
There's no need to. But you need to train.
Yeah.
It's a skill. All right, and you're not going to learn it once a month, just turning the PS4 on or Xbox or whatever. You're going to have to train.
Yeah.
And if you choose not to train, then you recognize you're handicapping yourself and your organization. All right? And I've news for you. It's going to hurt. It really, really hurts to train yourself, to understand what this content, because the metaverse is not about technology.
No.
People need to know. It's about content.
Yep.
The content is king. The technology is irrelevant. It's the content and how we share in that content. Gone are the days when you would watch a TV program that came out on the same time in the country, like in the UK or in France. Everybody saw the 7 o'clock movie, the 7 o'clock series, and back at work the following day, you were talking about it.
Yeah.
No, Ubisoft or whoever launches a game, and you're talking about it on social media. Yep. You're doing videos of you playing. All right. The water cooler's gone. The water cooler is social media now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is where that conversation's taken. And you need to be part of that. Because if you as a leader in an organization don't understand this shift, right, then, hell's teeth, you're in trouble.
And at the very least, you will be completely lost very soon when more and more younger people start taking positions of power around you. At the very least, you're going to be lost.
I would argue that exists now.
Yeah.
I would argue that the Gen Z coming in are looking at this generation of people and are bored stiff by if somebody sends them another video and a questionnaire and they call that learning material, then they go home and go on God of War. Yeah. It's like, hang on a minute, right? Or whatever. They're watching League of Legends on Twitch, and then they have to go to a corporate learning system that puts you to sleep.
There's a very well recognized and documented thing happening where people are no longer sticking with their job. People are looking for something better, more interesting, more fun, more engaging constantly. And
it's two parts to that great resignation. That shift. There's a generational side says, COVID woke me up to new values.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not going to lie. And the other one is Gen Z coming in. I have new values. I have no wish to be like my parents. Thank you very much.
But one of the things we can add on to that, there's a layer to that, which is if you look at the companies that are either in video games, like companies making video games, publishing them, or generally around the world of video games, or companies that embrace this sort of younger gamer culture, companies that have, computers with games and people can play on them after work, stuff like that. Those companies are not having as much of a problem with it. It's almost like they're more in tune with the culture. They're more in tune with the way people now think and the way people now work.
Well, we're going to end it here, but I think the word that I would use for that is the vibe.
Yeah.
right? And if you don't and if this older generation, and it's not necessarily an older generation, because I've met people in their 30s that act like they're in the 60s,
Yeah.
right? Don't get the vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow going into the business world seems to give people a lobotomy in terms of their imagination and what's happening around them. It's like you no longer see what's taking place around
Yep.
you. We only see it this way. We're formatted by the company to only see it like this. All right. So what I think Eric and I would like to end this podcast on is by setting you a challenge, right? That go out there and if you want to speak to us, we've got a list of games,
Yep.
and we'll coach you and help you, all right, to grow your experience, to be able to learn and get apprenticed in what this means. I just want to say, down below, please press like and subscribe, and
Yeah. Thanks for everything. And feel free to leave a comment if you've got stuff to share. And we'll see you on the next one.
bye bye.
Ciao.